Hello, everyone. Welcome into the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. Will Cooper and Art Mosley bringing it to you here on this November the 15th. It is a Wednesday. Hope you are all doing well out there as we are approaching the Thanksgiving holiday. Of course, that's Thursday of next week, and I know that somebody's looking forward to it. That is my good friend, Art Mosley. Art, how's it going, buddy?
I'm doing good, Coop. We're back for another podcast episode. Excuse me, and if we're podcasting in the middle of November, that can only mean one thing. One of our Cherokee County teams has made it to the second round of the state tournament.
They certainly have. That is the Sequoyah Chiefs with a 33-6 win over the Alpharetta Raiders. We'll talk all about that game and, of course, their matchup this week against Douglas County. That's where we'll be on Friday night. We're going to take the trip down to Douglas County. We'll be there bringing you live play-by-play action starting at 7 o'clock. So make sure you join us against Station Head app, stationhead.com, or you can always go to northgasportsnetwork.com/live and find us there. Also, it's basketball season for anybody that's not aware, so we'll talk a little bit about some Cherokee County hoops before we sign off here today as we are introducing our basketball coverage later in the season. It'll most likely be December by the time we get to that point, but December's not that far off, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But either way, excited to have you all here and excited to be able to talk about our athletes here. But Art, as you mentioned, let's lead with the Sequoyah Chiefs, their win over Alpharetta, 33-6. Slow start. You know, you and I were at Blessed Trinity. We watched Blessed Trinity Creekview play, and when we were watching the final score there, we kind of got to halftime. I think it was 12-6 at half, and we're sitting there wondering, you know, what's going on right now?
Sure.
This is, you know, is this going to be one of those defensive slugfests that, you know, Sequoyah has gotten away from in the last couple of weeks, you know, especially over the last month. Now, if that had been a game that had been played in August or September, we wouldn't be surprised by that. But I think the surprising point was their ability in the second half to come out and do what they needed to do. Very similar to the Woodstock game in a lot of sense, where you kind of get to halftime and you're winning, and you know, it probably wasn't ever really in question necessarily, but then that second half they really put their foot down and hit the gas. And Sequoyah certainly did, coasting to a 33-6 win. Playmakers all around. You know, Bretton Darling is going to be the story of this game. Blocked punt, you know, couple of grabs, and then obviously working both ways on defense as well. And then Ian Mariah, who continues to just be, quite frankly, one of the most physical players in Cherokee County. I know that Coach Jack Mine shared a couple of videos that he had from the game on Friday, and Ian Mariah is just not a guy I just want to stand in front of.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very physical young man, and he had a game. You mentioned Bretton Darling had a game. Like you mentioned, a little bit of a slow start from what we saw, what we thought, but Sequoyah able to get things going in the second half and not looking back, and they cruise to a victory. And it's kind of what you hope to establish. We'll talk a little bit later to Coach Teter about his thoughts on that game, and of course the game moving forward, as you mentioned before. So, congrats to Sequoyah. I'm happy for them. Selfishly, it just means we get to do this at least one more week. So we appreciate you guys waving the flag. Coach Buddy, I know you're listening. I know you will be listening. Thank you so much. You and your Vonda defense, we appreciate you, man. And, maybe I'll buy you some Chick-fil-A nuggets at some point down the line here.
Certainly owes you that. Yeah, I want to go over some of these key plays in this game as well. I think one of the big things was in the fourth quarter, they were able to drive from their own two, scored all the way down, thanks to a Will Rzecki touchdown grab. You know, Rzecki's a guy that we kind of mention, and I think that he's a sophomore, and we kind of just pencil him in, and we talk about him when he carries the ball, but he really is one of those guys that can kind of takes that offense and adds some great depth to it. When you know that you can go to three different backs, whether it's Hancock or Mariah or Rzecki, just the ability that they have. And, of course, he's a great pass catcher out of the backfield as well, so a lot of opportunities for him. So either way, Sequoyah with some big plays down the stretch. You know, one thing that we kind of gathered was their game was rather quickly over, and that is the Sequoyah way. Is, you know, everybody that's old loves being a Sequoyah fan because they get to be in bed by 9:30.
Sure,
that's why, you know,
that's why I love their games.
Exactly. So, but in all seriousness, that is a key to victory for them, and they did it in flying colors, and they were able to capitalize on the drives that they had. So either way, I think that all of that lines up for a very interesting game against Douglas County.
Yeah, it does. And Coop, before we get into that, there were two other playoff games. I want to briefly mention them before we jump into this week. River Ridge, both games played over in Roswell. River Ridge was at Roswell High School. That game, I would say, if you're a River Ridge fan, as we were getting score updates, it kind of went like we thought. River Ridge kind of hanging around. And then I think it's just a little bit too much Roswell, a little too late. The Knights, we thought if any school in that 6A classification, the 6A had a chance, it would be the Knights because of their propensity to score. But they just couldn't. That game's a track meet, and you've got to be able to keep up. And not many teams have been able to do that against Roswell. Only one. Milton was able to stymie them. So their season comes to an end. And then Creekview, the game that we did, they ran into a buzzsaw. And I tell you, they struggled to run the football, and it wasn't because they weren't trying. It was because Adrian Forbes and Matt Winter and DJ Jacobs were, and those are Blessed Trinity linebackers and linemen, did a phenomenal job of really focusing on stymieing the run and trying to make Creekview beat them, with the ground game. I will say, and I didn't mention this on Twitter this week, but I thought as a senior, and I only mention this because he's in a position to receive the ball. Michael Roach had one of the best games and left it all out on the field. And I would say the same thing for all those other seniors, but especially Roach got injured late, came back on, fight through it. He was doing everything he could in his power. Almost reminded me of a game I watched a couple years ago, back in 21 when Creekview was in the playoffs last. Tyler Stevens just went out. If you're going to go out, you're going to go out, fighting. And I think all those seniors, and then that specifically that performance by Roach kind of personified that senior class. So I know there's no moral victories, Coop. I understand this, but I did want to give that young man a shout out because I was very impressed, not just with Roach, Pearson Sears, Andrew Rosinski, Cam Mears along the line. You had Cal Schubert as well, who was probably a little bit limited, a little banged up. Lee Brock I thought played well in the secondary. It's tough. And I mean, along the lines, we saw Beckett Singleton make a cup. On the offensive line, we saw Griffin Jane getting there. And now I'm gonna the other defensive end because I'm going off the top of my head. Thank you. Trey Thomas had a sack, had a PBU. It was he did some great. Those guys did some great things. I'm probably forgetting one. That Reed Anderson as well. Had a phenomenal season. So I can't go through the entire roster, but us being there, being able to see that game, just want to give those guys a shout out.
Yeah, they did a fantastic job. I agree with you in a lot of sense. I mean, Roach just kind of at times put the offense on his back. And just kind of had to, literally drag Blessed Trinity's defenders with him as he dragged the offense down the field at times. Kind of everything gets personified in that sense where you have to be able to capitalize on your opportunities. And Absolutely. That kind of ended up being the crux of the issue at the end of the day. There were a couple points that were left on the board from time to time. But either way, it is a successful season for those two teams, I feel like, by most metrics.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think maybe fans might be a little frustrated by some of it, but I thought overall just the matchups were, especially for River Ridge. I mean, you talked about it with Roswell. I mean, you just kind of go into that game and it's like, how do we get to 50? We got to get to 50. And it's just, when you put that much pressure on an offense, I mean, it's almost impossible.
You have to be flawless. And then, and again, this is, I think River Ridge has two very impressive backs coming back, and we're looking forward to see them next year. But you're going up against a seasoned offensive line over there, with a high level, a high major D1 recruit, and then a running back who's going to go play at a high level as well. And it's just, it's just a little bit difference in Jimmy's and Joe's there. And again, River Ridge went out punching, and that's what both these teams I thought went out punching. And hats off. We didn't mention the seniors over at River Ridge, but hats off to the guys like Brandon Burdett, Faletra, Andrew Hand, who picked up a PWO this week from KSU. Yep. So hats off to him as well, man. It's great to see these young men that want to continue playing in college. That's awesome. And it's also great to see these young men who won't play again. I think that's something that gets overlooked, is like there's nothing wrong with just being a really good high school football player.
Right.
And then going and being a productive member of society.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we put way too much pressure on, I've got to get my 25 offers and, you can only play for one school and that needs to be the right fit for you and your future. And it's tough. I know it's tough when you're young. You don't know what you really want to do with your life. Some adults I know don't even know what they want to do with their life.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, I think it's commendable. And as fans of the sport, not just commentators or pundits, but as fans of the sport, I think we just appreciate the seniors at every school. The ones I mentioned off air. I saw had a chance to talk to Javon Hobson earlier this week. In passing and just kind of you see these kids, you're like, man, they're moving on, and hopefully their college plans will work out. But man, they've provided us with a lot to talk about over the last few years, especially this senior class. I feel like we've talked about these seniors. They've had a lot of playing time for every school. So anyway, just hats off and a shout out to all our seniors. Maybe this is a senior send off for me, but I just want to say thank you for all those guys. Anyone in the class of 2024, we appreciate you.
You probably have you seen, Charlie Brown Christmas?
I have.
Okay,
like a gazillion times.
All right. Well, Lucy has the psychiatry stand, and she,
yes,
puts the nickel.
Yeah.
That's you want people to start putting nickels in your jar.
They can.
That was very eloquent.
I'm gonna set up right outside of the main gym at Cherokee High School, and you can come by.
There you go. Good central location.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I echo your sentiment on all of that. You always hope that, and you're right, you get so focused on the kids that do get the 4-star ratings, and you're focused on, who do you know? Like, I know a lot of times when I watch Georgia play, for example, I know that kid, he played here, and, obviously David Daniels over there, and, I actually, knew him.
Right,
and,
right.
Even some kids you don't know by direct association, but we called Lawson Lucky's game. He got in the game. We called Oscar Delp's game. So you do know some of those kids, and that's great. But to me, it's the kids that, to echo your sentiment here at the end, is the fact that the kids that maybe don't play college sports in any capacity, they're just good people, and they're good members of society, to your point. I think that there's something to be said about that too, and there's plenty of those kids to go through in the 6 years I've been doing this. So I agree with you on that front. So either way, now that we got all the sappy stuff out.
Yeah, we did. And before we get back to our game this week, I do want to give a shout out to one of our listeners, Tristan McWilliams over at Creekview. I want to give him a shout out, man, because I've heard through the grapevine he listens, and he was like, hey, can you give me a shout out? So yeah, we're giving free ones out. And then one last thing, Coop. I know we're going to talk about basketball in a minute. We talked about this last week early. We had 2 region champs in the state in the competitive cheer. The Creekview Grizzlies did end up finishing 3rd in state for comp cheer. So shout out. What do you call them? The cheering Grizzlies? I don't know. Is there a nickname for that? I mean, somebody help me out. Creekview Grizzly competition cheer parent. Can you help me out?
We need to expand our North Georgia Sports Network staff to include, and this is not a paid position. We don't get paid either. But to expand it to we have a cheerleading pundit.
Right.
We can
an
ask,
expert.
right?
Yeah.
Because I have no idea.
I have no idea.
There's
either.
somebody out there that knows.
I don't. I've never been to a cheerleading competition.
Nope.
This is what I do know, right? As a basketball coach, as a fan, like when you have cheerleaders there, it does add to the atmosphere of the ball game. Like It's just part of the trappings of Friday night. That's like football game. They're there, and so anyway, it's not like we're not talking about Yale leaders. This is not A&M, right?
Right.
I'm sorry, I had to get a dig in.
Well, I mean, they dig themselves into a big hole. So.
Well, any shot I can take at Texas A&M, I will.
Amen.
All right.
You are free to do so.
And so in any event, we're talking about cheerleaders, not Yale leaders here, right? So again, congrats to Creekview, and if somebody can kind of help us understand competition, let me know.
Yeah, please do. You have our contact information.
Absolutely.
We would love to know. And I'm sure we'll get to that point in spring. We're going to be looking at some of these sports and be like, gosh, I don't know anything about that, to be honest with you. So we're going to need, some experts in other fields.
Absolutely.
We're very limited in our knowledge.
Well, with all that being said,
let's move on to the actual game of the week. Again, Sequoyah versus Douglas County. We'll be making the trip down to Douglas County. You can join us, Stationhead app, stationhead.com. You know where to find us at this point. We've been doing this for 14 weeks. So if you don't know where to find us, then not a lot I can do for you. Either way, with all of that, we are going to talk to Coach Teter here in just a minute, but I want to kind of preface this game a little bit. Maybe people, especially around here, aren't super familiar with Douglas County. We should go over their resume. 11-0, kind of ranked. Where are they at in your ranking?
So my last poll I did, they were at number 6, which is probably a little disservice to them.
Okay.
Maybe they're feeling disrespected by the Turd Ferguson report poll.
That's according to CalPreps, they're number 2.
Yeah, I've seen that too. I'm gonna
keep your mouth shut about that.
Yeah, that's fine. I will say they knocked off, and one of those wins is they beat the defending state champ Langston Hughes.
Right. So they have a pretty good resume. There are some games early in the year that don't make necessarily a ton of sense comparatively.
Yes.
One of those being their game against Mays, where Mays took them right down to the wire. Now, Mays still in the playoffs. They're going to play Cass this week, so I think they were the 2nd seed in that region there. But Stockbridge was one. They won that game by 7. Stockbridge is an okay team. But
the Tigers have been a historically pretty good team down in Class 4A. I don't believe Stockbridge won their region this year.
I don't know. I don't think
they
so.
were the number 2.
I think they were 3.
Were they really?
Yeah, I think they lost 2 region games.
But in any event, Stockbridge is a respectable football team. But again, a team, when you see a team, that has been putting up some of the points lately that Douglas County has been putting up, you kind of look at them saying, okay, 6A team, 4A team, hey, what's really going on here? And again, I think some of that is credit to their opponent. They just, they're pretty good.
Yeah, and then McEachern was their final out-of-region game. They beat them 31-0, and that kind of kick-started the defense that outside of the Langston Hughes game, since then they've allowed 0, 2, 14, 7, 7, and then 9 last week to Habersham Central, who they played in the first round. So the defense is good. Now, you might be thinking they're a defensive team. That would be a misnomer because since Langston Hughes, where they scored 30, they've scored 50, 27, 48, 41, 30, and then 63 last week against Habersham Central. So they do it both ways. They're scoring about 41.5 points per game. They're only allowing about 11 or 12.
And just a minor correction, Stockbridge did end up winning that region.
Okay.
Only 2 losses for Stockbridge this season were to Douglas County and then Colquitt County.
Okay, so
in
I
the
guess
second week. Yeah, so
got it.
I was maybe gotten my wires crossed, but an impressive team. Again, I know we're not talking about Stockbridge. They put up in 11 games this season. They put up 502 points, so averaging just under about 48 points a game or something like that. So anyway, Douglas County has been battle-tested.
Yes, yeah, they're certainly good, and they haven't danced through an easy region necessarily. Now, you could argue that because of Langston Hughes, maybe the rest of that region isn't necessarily powerhouses outside of them, but either way, Douglas County did win the region, and again, their closest game came against Mays, which was a 6-point win for them. So they're good. They're a very good team, and they've really hit their stride. They're playing ball the right way at the right time, and they also have the talent across the board. So Douglas County is going to have a couple of guys that you should keep an eye on in terms of Power 5 offers, as much as we just talked about how that's not always the most important thing. But they have a corner, Israel Boyce. He's a senior. He'll be a Mountaineer next year. He's committed to West Virginia. They have a 4-star sophomore. If you're unfamiliar with how rankings work, typically the underclassmen don't get those high rankings until they get to be juniors and seniors. Already a 4-star. He's got offers from Bama, UGA, Clemson. Name your school, he can go there. 6'3", 235, 12 sacks. He's going to be a huge factor. And then on offense, they're much different. They run the ball really by committee. They have a bunch of different guys they're going to run the ball with. But one guy that we should keep an eye on is James Johnson. He's a 3-star junior. He's local, got some offers from Georgia, Georgia Tech, Tennessee, and Washington. So some bigger schools have started calling. He's got 647 yards through the air with 6 touchdowns, but he also has ran for 327 yards and 12 touchdowns. So he's going to be a guy to keep an eye on as well. And, of course, we'll go more in depth on Douglas County as we get into our broadcast on Friday. But overall, they're a very good team, very balanced. They average about 26.5 rush yards per game. They average about 238 pass yards per game, 55 total touchdowns on the year, only 7 turnovers. They just are a complete football team right now, and they are showing why with some of these wins that they've been putting up. And Sequoyah is going to have it's an interesting challenge for Sequoyah.
Yeah, it is, Coop. You mentioned their rush yards, 261 yards a game on the ground. The 3 guys, you mentioned running back by committee, Jamarcus Lindley, Kiki Kelly, and then Michael Hasty have combined for 1,729. You mentioned James Johnson, his yardage as well. Just a very dynamic offense, as we talked about. Almost 500 yards of offense per game. So they're getting it done both ways. It's just something you don't see week in and week out. You only see really on those upper echelon teams, and that's really what Coach Johnny White has done well for Douglas County. Defensively, you talk about how well they've done as of late. Coop, they've sacked quarterbacks 53 times. That is something that you just don't see. Jordan Carter and Marquacious Wright, both of them pace a team with 12 sacks apiece, so they're really getting after the quarterback. Had a chance to watch their game against Hab Central, and one thing that jumped off the tape for me was just like team speed. Yeah. And it didn't take long. They scored early and often, and it didn't take long for them to do it. So that's a very interesting team. The one note we talked about off air, I found very curious about Douglas County, or maybe great for Coach White and his team and the folks down there in Douglasville, and not so great for their opponents over the next couple years. All of their skill position players, save for their quarterback, Sire Hardaway, they're all underclassmen. Hardaway's a senior. We mentioned over 2,200 yards. I want to say he's one of the top passers in. If he's not leading 6A in passing, he's right there up at the top.
Well, I think the most impressive thing is not necessarily the yardage, which you're right. He's got 2,261 yards, 19 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. He's completing 73% of his passes.
Yeah.
That is, it's like you just know when he steps back to pass. I mean that's kind of the challenge with this game, and really anybody that's going to play Douglas County is just, I don't know how you ever disrupt that rhythm enough to, because even if you disrupt his rhythm, what's he going to complete 60% instead of 73? So he goes from being, otherworldly to being great. It's just, there's going to have to be some things there that are going to have to be figured out, because that is such a difficult assignment to figure out what you want to do. And your point about underclassmen, 4 out of their 5 offensive linemen are underclassmen as well. So they're bringing, Douglas County is going to be good not only this year, but even if they lose, maybe not even to Sequoyah, but in the next round, the winner of Lee County and Lovejoy. Sure. Even if they lose to one of those teams, their window is still wide open.
Yeah, absolutely. But you want to talk, you want to go to Coach Teter first and then kind of break down this game a little bit more?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's do that.
Thank you for joining us on the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. And joining us now is the head coach of the Sequoyah Chiefs, Coach James Teter. Coach, thank you for being back with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back.
Appreciate it, Coach. Obviously, it's a good news when we start talking to you in November, especially as we get later in November, because that means Cherokee County's winning playoff teams, and specifically for you guys, your first playoff win since 2018. Obviously, a lot of history being made this year in terms of that. But I want to ask, from our standpoint, as we were over at another game, we got to keep a track on the score, and it seemed like you guys got off to a little slow start and then really put your foot on the gas there at the end of that game. What did you see in that game versus Alpharetta, and what did you like, and what were some things that you wanted to see changed moving into this week?
Well, obviously, we'd rather have a faster start, but I think that's just a case of nerves. With the playoffs and everything, and kids a little bit tight. But what we liked, we got off, with the block punt, kind of got our kids to settle down a little bit. It just took us a while offensively to figure things out. And once we figured it out, then we kind of took off with everything. But for the most part, we were really pleased with how our kids handled everything. Some of that, like we talked about, was expected, them to be a little tight there at the beginning. But again, once we settled in, it was just like any other game for our kids.
Coach, I want to talk about your kids. Got a question. I feel like we've asked you, we've had you on so much this season. We've asked you about every position player, but I do want to take a moment to talk about one of your star offensive linemen, Brady Curl, who committed earlier this week. You have a guy like that who moves over from offense to defense. What kind of player has Brady been for you as you look at his body of work for his whole career? We know he'll be moving on after the season anyway as a senior, but his body of work and this commitment, what does that mean for you as a coach, and what has he meant for you all as a player?
Brady's meant a lot to us. He started during the COVID year when we had some people who got sent home, and he had to be thrown into some action early as a ninth grader. And he handled that really well, and he's just gotten better as the years went on. He started out as a nose guard, and then when we needed some serious help 3 years ago at offensive line, he didn't hesitate. He jumped right in. But Brady's been awesome. He's a good team leader. He leads by example. He's pretty much what you want in a player. I just think he's grown leaps and bounds from year one, and his strength has gotten a lot better. His understanding of what he has to do on the offensive line has really gotten a lot better. And then he's just been a great help to some of the younger guys. He's been a tremendous player for us.
Coach, and on that point, as we're talking about guys that have gone both ways and made a big impact, you talked about the blocked punt. Bretton Darling, really kind of the star of the show there a little bit in terms of special teams and some of the plays he made offensively. I think a lot of people in the quote-unquote media, us included, get so focused on guys like Jackson Hancock that sometimes we forget to mention guys like him. And can you talk a little bit about his impact on the game and then more broadly kind of this season and on the program?
Oh, Britton's been awesome. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people about him, and especially with their recruiters, he sometimes gets a little bit overshadowed by Jackson. But he's probably the most steady person we have on defense back there. He gets everything set in the secondary. But Britton's biggest asset so far in the last 4 or 5 weeks has been us getting him on offense and getting him started. He's really, I think, helped Colby kind of relax and feel a little bit more comfortable about who he's throwing to. And he's just been a huge impact for us offensively. Some of the catches he made the other night were unbelievable. It's getting people his ability to do things he's doing is getting people to come off of Jackson. They can't double cover him as much. And same thing as when Tyler's out there. It's Britton's being out there has really helped us a bunch. And it's just kind of, if you notice, once he started that Creekview game, our offense has kind of took off. So he's just been a tremendous asset. But, he, like Brady, was one of those young men who got thrown in early as a freshman. And being able to have that experience over the 4 years has really helped him a ton and helped him with us.
Coach, in terms of senior classes, and you talked about Bretton and his starting experience. Jackson has played, I would say, the better part of 4 years for you. Brady, we mentioned. This team seems like it has played a lot of games over their tenure. As a senior class, how do you view them and coming into a playoff atmosphere? Now your second week, they've got some experience under their belt, but is it different with? Let me rephrase this. Is this senior class maybe a little bit similar to your senior class you had back in 2018? I know that the makeup of that team was a little bit different, but how do you compare those two in terms of the last two teams you had to advance in the playoffs?
They're very similar. We've kind of had this conversation this week in our office a lot. The difference in the two, that team in 18 had some big-time vocal leaders. This team, for what they've been able to do and accomplish and to overcome really in the last 2 years, especially with our starts the last 2 years, has been really special because we don't have a big-time vocal leader. We don't have that player that when things kind of need to be adjusted can stand up and get everybody going. There's just not that vocal person. So in having that and be able to overcome some things that they had, and people forget back when we played Cedartown, we were missing quite a few people. Mm-hmm. We played with an entire JV offensive line. So to be able to overcome some of those things, to be overcome some of the other ups and downs that we had, this class has been very special. And we're probably as proud, if maybe not a little bit prouder than the group we had in 18, just from the standpoint how they've been able to overcome this. And, obviously we were talking about it last week. Here's Ian catches a touchdown, run for one, and throws for one. Jackson, if you go back and look at his stats, is probably not as visible on offense as he had been the other games. That each week, if one kid's not doing it, there seems to be another kid that kind of steps up and makes it happen. And that's probably what's been so special about this group.
Well, Coach, as you mentioned, kind of the comparison there to 2018, obviously the big comparison is winning a playoff game in those seasons, and you guys have earned the right to move on to the second round. You'll head south and take on Douglas County, one of the top 10 teams in 6A, and rightfully so. What is your kind of diagnosis of Douglas County from what you've seen on film, and what are you looking for in some of the challenges in this game?
Very well coached, very athletic, big, fast. The challenge is going to be, again, I was talking to the newspaper the other day, and it seems like a broken record, but the challenge is kind of slowing down their offense. And as we've said in those other weeks, we can help our defense out a ton if we can find a way to have those typical wing T type drives that eats up clock. We've got to find a way to keep them off the field and hopefully get them a little bit frustrated that they can kind of make mistakes. And that's kind of what happened last week. We would eat up a little bit of time, and I think sometimes Alpharetta pressed a little bit and made a few mistakes that they hadn't been making. Douglas County's got a really good quarterback, and again, they've got a really good running back and some speed, and then defensively they're big and fast. So we're going to have to be able to maintain some blocks and find a way to stay on them a little bit so we can kind of get a crease and be able to eat up the clock and hold the ball for a while.
Coach, does this Douglas County team remind you at all of the Creekside team you faced in 2018 in terms of the talent and speed they have, or is this two different teams from your perspective?
It's two different teams, but things are very similar because, you were talking about 18. We played Alpharetta in the first round, and then we went to Creekside, and I said the same thing when we finally turned on film on Sunday, that they are so much resemble Creekside that hopefully the same result comes. But yeah, they do remind us a ton of them.
Well, Coach, we certainly enjoyed having you as always, and we're glad to glad that you're able to join us and always make time. If I may, I think it's one thing. You have had success in your own, but one of your former players also has had some success in getting a relatively local team. Coach, you had, and I don't want to give away your age, but I feel like I'm putting you on the spot. But what does it mean for you to see one of your former players have success as a head coach and get his team to the postseason? And this is not Douglas County's coach; this is Wheeler's coach over there. But what does that mean for you, Coach?
It means a lot. I mean, Brian's a great, young man, and he's doing a tremendous job over at Wheeler. I'm very proud of him. That's what I had texted you the other day. Because our background from the area we're from there in Florida. But Brian has done a tremendous job in getting that team ready and finding a way to get them in the playoffs. Very proud of him. It means a lot. It means a lot for him too.
Well, Coach, I mean that's awesome that your coaching tree is doing great things. Your teams are doing great things, and specifically the 2023 version of the Sequoyah Chiefs are doing great things. We look forward to having the call down in Douglasville as you all face the Douglas County Tigers. We wish you safe travels and the best of luck.
Thank you so much, and hopefully we're talking next week.
So thank you to Coach Teter again for being with us. We were trying to figure out how many times we've talked to him. We believe this is number 7.
Yeah, including the preseason.
Right. So we've got to talk to Coach Teter a lot this year, and we're very thankful for that. And, of course, as we mentioned on the podcast interview there, is that when you get to late November, middle November, and you're still doing coaches interviews, that's always a good sign.
Absolutely. Coop, will be even more fun to be doing them the week of Thanksgiving, right?
I would be happy to do that. It's been a while. I'd be happy to do that. But, yeah, let's break down this game from a fundamental standpoint. Sequoyah is going to have their hands full, large part. I think one of the things that Coach Teter mentioned, and you and I talked about it over text earlier this week, that they will need to do is to manage the clock. I think the fact that they have the ability to stretch this game and make it an 8-minute, 9-minute drive and keep that defense on the side, that's going to be key for them, because if Douglas County gets to touch the ball a bunch, they're going to score a bunch.
Absolutely.
And, I think the other thing with Douglas County is you're not going to hold them to a few points. I think you have to get that out of your head. The idea of holding them to 14 or 21, not going to happen. So if you're Sequoyah's offense, it's almost like let's get to 30 and let's see from there what we need to do. Now that's, again, this is a defense that's allowing up just about 12 points per game. So a lot easier said than done. But I do think it's possible for Sequoyah to, even if they need a little help on special teams like they got last week with Darling on, the blocked punt. We've obviously seen Jackson Hancock, who returns punts for them, or on kickoff returns. He has that ability to make up for that end. They have playmakers around, but they're going to have to find a way to facilitate some of those things that will be edges for them.
Absolutely, Coop. I think one of the things that we neglect to talk about, and maybe we did talk about it last week, but the secondary. And I asked Coach Teter last week about, is this strength on strength? And maybe one of the things that benefits Sequoyah this week is that they faced a team that passed the ball a lot last week.
Yes.
And so in terms of being ready for the aerial assault of Douglas County, Sequoyah, I think they can figure out a way to match up. Then the concern is, all right, well, how do we slow down a team that is able to do both very well? And so I think that adds a completely new dynamic where the Tigers can keep the Chiefs off balance, or can the Chiefs snuff that out? We've seen Sequoyah be really good against the run. We've seen them be really good against the pass. I don't know if we've seen them face a team like Douglas County that has so many weapons, and they're, like you mentioned, they run 4 deep at running back, and so it's not it's not just one guy you're trying to slow down there.
Maybe similar to Rome in some aspects. I would still think Douglas County may be a little bit more talented than Rome this year. It's just it's not the same.
Right.
Really.
I think they try to get you a little bit different ways. I think, Douglas County is going to go a little bit more vertical in their passing game. I think they try to be a little more physical in the run game than Rome. So it's going to be a little bit different outlook there. But certainly in terms of a team speed, what you would see out of a Rome, I think you get the same or similar with Douglas County.
Yeah, I think the play calling's different, but I think the terms of talent and the game plan is mostly the same.
Right.
Just from the outset of limiting possessions and the offensive explosiveness, and the defense where you're going to have to navigate between a really good defensive end and the linebackers that are big and physical, and that corner that it seems like you just don't want to throw to his side of the ball, or his side of the field, I should say. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges with this for Sequoyah. I do think one thing that will be interesting to watch is Douglas County goes deep across the board. They have a lot of guys with a lot of different stats. Even their backup wide receivers have over 200 yards. Like you mentioned, the running back stable of 4 guys if you include James Johnson in that. They're deep. They're deep across the board. Sequoyah is going to have players working both ways. Mm-hmm. They're going to have to kind of decide, what they want to do, especially if early Douglas County scores and they kind of start getting on a roll. Is Sequoyah going to have to navigate how many snaps they're willing to let those guys play on offense or defense, keep them fresh for the fourth quarter? If they get out to that early lead, I don't think it matters because Sequoyah is going to take 35 seconds in between each play.
Right.
They get rest. They basically just stand. It's like they're standing on the sidelines. Mm-hmm. So you don't really exhaust them in that sense. It's not an exhaustion game. It's a frustration game.
Yeah, and I think we saw maybe some of the game plan in action last season. And I don't want to compare. I don't think we can really compare Sal Paulding and of last season with this season's Douglas County. But in terms of talent, you had an extremely talented running back, extremely talented quarterback, a couple of really good wide receivers, and a pretty good
offensive line had Madden Sanker.
Yep. Yeah. And so I think you have seen, and a lot of these players have that experience from last season of some of that speed. We talked about Rome, some of that experience. So you've seen Sequoyah be able to neutralize some of that speed in a way in a game that they were in for about 2.5 quarters.
Yeah, they really were, and they weren't nearly as complete as they were this year.
Right.
That's what I would say.
Right.
Is that this Sequoyah team just seems. The other thing is they don't have a lot of injuries right now.
No, they don't.
They're playing pretty clean.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, no, hey, I get it. I'm just saying going into the game at least, that when you talk about some guys that they could have lost, especially with the use of those guys two ways, they really haven't. Now, they had guys that have been banged up through the year, haven't played for one reason or the other, but at this point, they're healthy, which is getting healthy at the right time in a large sense. So there are some things that Sequoyah can do to make this interesting and win the game. I don't want it to sound like it's hopeless because it's not. And I'll be honest, Coach Teter sounds very hopeful about this matchup here. And, I think sometimes us as Cherokee County fans get the recency bias of let's compare everything to Etowah 2014 and, Sequoyah 2018 and, Creekview 2018 and River Ridge 2020. But I do think that there is something to be said about the comparison that he's making and kind of the makeup of that team, because you and I talked about it. They played Creekside in round 2, and a lot of people didn't really give them much of a chance to win that one. And that was a team that didn't score a ton of points necessarily. They kind of did it defensively first, and the wing T sometimes did well. They scored 50 points in that game and ended up beating Creekside. So, I think Sequoyah could potentially have the makeup for a little bit of a shootout if they were required to do that. It's not what they want to do, but could Sequoyah put up 40 points? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Coop, that team that year, and you talked about they didn't have a huge propensity to score a ton of points. They were putting about 32 points a game, so a little bit ahead of this edition of Sequoyah. And it, like we asked Coach Teter about the two teams, they did have some similarities between them. So I think anything is possible. There's a reason they play the game. We saw some big upsets last week in the first round of the playoffs. North Cobb getting upset by Collins Hills, probably the one that comes to mind the most for me in the first round of the playoffs. But in any event, stranger things have happened. And I don't think that Coach White and his Douglas County Tigers will be taking the Sequoyah Chiefs for granted.
No, I don't think so. And then when you talk about the line across the board, it's about 21-28 is typically the kind of the metric where the predictors put them at. So depending on your statistical reasoning wise, when you talk about a 21-point difference, it puts Sequoyah at about a 6% chance to win. Now, of course, that all gets thrown out the window after a blocked punt or a couple turnovers. Then that whole operation shifts. But either way, I think Sequoyah has an interesting combination of experience from going on the road to South Paulding last year, combined with some of the games they played this year, where they went to Lambert, they went to Raven Gap. Mm-hmm. They obviously hosted Rome, but they have some experience this year that may be a little different than it was last year. Again, a few more pieces that have seemed to mesh together here, and the coaching staff seems to have come together at the right time as well. Coach Jack Mine, in combination with Coach Teter, have a really good plan offensively, and then Coach Buddy and obviously Coach Teter as well have done a good job defensively, where they continue to hold teams to below their average. So all that being said, we're excited to have the game Friday night, 7 o'clock. Again, join us, Stationhead app, stationhead.com, and, of course, northgasportsnetwork.com/live. If you would like to find an easier way to join us, there's a Join Live button there that you can also tune in, and we'll be there bringing you live play-by-play action, and hopefully we can be back on the podcast next week. We'll be back on a podcast next week anyway, just in terms of basketball, but hopefully we can be doing something instead of a football wrap-up.
There we go.
All right, well, with that being said, we should jump into basketball since we discussed it.
Let's do it, Coop.
Well, for anyone, since this is our first basketball-related episode, we should throw a disclaimer at the beginning of our basketball segment. You have an affiliation.
Yes.
So just so everybody's aware, you are the freshman boys coach, but you also are on the...
I'm a varsity assistant, yeah.
Okay, so there you go. So just so if anybody, just for full disclosure, now I think that we're pretty good at putting aside our own thoughts in terms of what happens because we're just fans of the county, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that because it will.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Well, let's start with your team. You guys, big win over Centennial, 85-66 there. You guys had a couple of players, one in particular I'll let you talk about since you're obviously much closer to the program. But a big win to start out the season and looking forward to that. Obviously, last year you guys went to the state title and, gave Wheeler a game there at the end. But what's your opinion of that game and what did you see from your very special vantage point right there along the bench?
Yeah, Coop, we still got to do a better job playing help defense, and we got to talk more on offense. And I'm going to give you the coach speak right now.
Yeah, go for it. This is our basketball coaches interview. I'm going to put it in the description and a special interview with.
Again, what I would say is the Centennial Knights, first of all, well-coached basketball team, and it's a team that we've had a chance to play the last third year. We've got a chance to open up the season with them. Again, well-coached basketball team. Coach Barksdale does a great job with his players. He's got some new guys coming in, but we were able to get some things going early. Lawrence Sanford is a name I think that most people around the county, if they don't know already, they will know. He had a career high game last night of 40 points. I think we still have our work cut out for us. It's back to work. It's game one of at least 20. What do we get? 25 regular season games, I think, on varsity before the region tournament. So, game one of that. It's nice to get that, get the first win out of the way and get a little bit of something on film so we can come back to work and get back to work and be prepared as we come in. We'll play America Sumter on Saturday and then, on Saturday and then go into the Thanksgiving break. So,
big win though. Big
win. Nice. Also, I mean, had it wasn't just Lawrence,
Right.
Tanner Savasier, nice to see him back on the basketball court. And he again, providing valuable minutes for us among some others. And, later in the season when we talk to Coach Beam, we'll talk about them. I don't want to steal too much of his thunder.
Right. Cherokee girls, big win over Centennial as well. You guys talk about your margin of victory, but Cherokee girls, for anyone who's not familiar, I don't know how you wouldn't be. Cherokee girls basketball has kind of been a staple of really success. It's been the pinnacle of success.
Absolutely.
It's been the Alabama, Georgia of girls basketball, not only in the county, but in really the larger state.
Absolutely.
And they continue to roll 84-38 over Centennial. Again, how good is Centennial, the girls team, coming into this one? Probably you can answer that a little better.
Yeah, well, two things. First of all, big shout out to Coach Sharon Swanson, Cherokee alum.
There you go.
One of the all-time
hometown crowd.
One of the all-time leading scorers, taking over in her first season as head coach, gets her first win. As you mentioned, big win over there. Coop, this score at one point was 27-24 midway through the second quarter, and the Cherokee goes on a 14-0 run at some point. It might have been more. I just remember at one point I looked up and I was like, wow, it's 41-24. That's 17 straight points. Oh my goodness. Or 14 straight points, excuse me. And then they go on to roll. Tony Warren, leading scorer. She is inching closer and closer to 1,000 points. Great job. This is a team that's got a lot of pieces. It's not just Tony Warren. There's a lot of pieces around her. Alex Whitecliff does a great job. A couple more pieces. Will Riley Simmons. They all do a great job. And I'm excited. Probably just as excited for Coach Swanson and this team for Cherokee as I am for the boys this season.
So what you're saying is that Cherokee's got the makings on both sides of having a pretty good basketball season.
Let's not get carried away.
Okay.
Let's not get carried away.
All right.
But I'm excited.
Give me the rat poison here, right?
I'm excited about the season.
All right. Well, we are looking forward to seeing what you guys can do as you continue. Obviously, you mentioned the game on Saturday coming up for you guys. Let's talk about Creekview. We'll go in alphabetical order.
Sure.
With the basketball stuff.
Sure.
Keep it simple. They're 1-1. They actually played on Saturday. They beat Forsyth Central 76-45, and then they lost to South Forsyth on Tuesday or yesterday, depending on when you're listening to this, 58-50. Creekview, new leadership over there. Going to be interesting to see how they can continue to develop. I know they have a couple of pieces there that are certainly primed to have big years for the Grizzlies, but Creekview not necessarily like a historically fantastic basketball program, but they've had great players come through there. So I think for fans of Cherokee County basketball, it'd be great to see the Grizzlies be able to put together a good season this year.
Yeah, Coop, I agree with what you're saying. They've got a relatively young team. You mentioned Coach Whitlock coming over from Denmark. He's the new head coach over at Creekview. If I had a player to watch, just from being around the county, Luke Jack is probably the guy I'm looking at. He has played a little bit point guard. He's played a little bit of shooting guard. He's a very versatile player. He's tough. He knows how to get downhill. He can shoot the three. He can finish at the rim. Everything you want in a basketball player. And then Griffin Latimer, that kid walks in the gym and he's in range. So they give you trouble from a couple different places. And again, like you mentioned, they are a team that under new leadership. We'll see how that works out. Again, Charlie Wood, another player who kind of does a little bit of everything for them. So they came up short last night. As you mentioned, they did beat Forsyth Central on Saturday. So I think with that team, it's going to be a little bit of ups and downs with a new head coach as they figure each other out. But I think they have the nucleus to do something special. And those a couple of those players, especially Luke Jack and Griffin Latimer, underclassmen, so they'll have a couple of years under Coach Whitlock's tutelage.
Yeah, certainly have the makings there. The Creekview girls team has not played yet. I did see Kyle Sandy had them at number 9 in the preseason ranking. So something to watch there for fans of basketball, because obviously the girls team, we talk about River Ridge, and we'll talk about them a little bit later. I know people are familiar with the story as them winning the state title last year, but interesting to see Creekview there at number 9.
Yeah, they've got 3 seniors in particular, and their names are going to escape me right now, that all have an opportunity to play at the next level. So they've got they return some talent. The word is this could be a pretty good basketball team for Creekview this season.
Good deal. Looking forward to seeing that. Let's move on to Etowah.
Okay.
The boys team, I think Etowah boys almost got a little bit overshadowed last year by what Cherokee did in some aspects, just because you don't usually get a boys team that goes to the Final Four, and Etowah ended up there, and I'm trying to remember who they lost to. Was it Alexander?
It was the eventual state champion,
okay,
yes.
Yeah. So tough break for them. Obviously, Rex Steiner will not be there anymore, who's already a huge impact player at Virginia
Sure.
Tech. So obviously a little bit different there. But either way, Etowah with a big win over North Springs to start the season, 65-34. 31-point win will work every day of the week. I'll be interested to see the makeup of Etowah without, Rechsteiner. Obviously, it'll be a different look this year. But obviously, you get a closer look at them. You guys will eventually play them this year. What do you think of the Etowah boys team right now?
It's very solid defensively. I think, this is going to sound like coach speak, but Coach Dassinger over there does a great job in getting these guys to they do a good job of forcing you to play their pace. They typically don't get rattled. It's going to be a little bit younger team. I think a name to watch over there, and if I can give one, it'll be Aiden Weaver. I've had a chance to see this young man play. He's probably a little bit taller than Luke Jack over at Creekview, but has an ability to shoot the ball outside, but really finishes well at the rim. I wouldn't necessarily call him a rim protector, but just super bouncy and just a guy that you've got to keep your eye on both sides of the floor because he rebounds well as well.
Hopefully they can have a good year as well. Talking about the Etowah girls now, they've done it by defense so far. Okay, they beat North Springs 53-14. Turnaround beat Northview the day after 76-30. Now obviously the numbers are crooked on both sides, but
Sure.
really that you held a team to 14. That's a really good defensive basketball team right there over at Etowah.
Yeah, Etowah, new head coach, I believe, for the girls. And so this is a team that I probably know the least about is the Etowah girls basketball. But as you mentioned, getting it done with defense, I think outside of the county games and outside of those region games, you might see a lot of lopsided scores like this when you have a team that maybe a little more organized, a little bit more talented. Tends to be sometimes a higher disparity of talent in the girls' game and the boys' game at certain schools here. But good to see Etowah off to a 2-0 run. Etowah girls off to a 2-0 start this season.
Absolutely, it'd be fun to watch them as well. It sounds like, and I know this is shocking for everyone out there, but it seems like there may be 3 or 4 girls teams this year that have the opportunity to really
Absolutely.
make some waves.
Absolutely.
Which is just Cherokee County for you, right?
There you go.
We found a sport that we win at.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I like that.
All right, let's move on to River Ridge. Obviously, River Ridge boys last year, another team a lot like Etowah that maybe got overshadowed by some of the accomplishments of other county teams, but a very, really good team. And as a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, you and I had a conversation about their team. They're very tall. This is going to be a big River Ridge Knights team, and they had a big win over Northview to start. It seems like everybody's playing Northview, North Springs, some kind of North team, 87-30. So the defensive trend continues, and also putting up 87 in the first game of the season is a pretty good metric as well. Sometimes you can get a little, it's hard to get going the right way, but River Ridge off to a very fast start, and impressive win for River Ridge.
Yeah, Coach Darling has done a good job over there. They've got a team, as you mentioned, as you talked about, Coop, is they've got good size over there. I'm very, very interested. Zeb Runyon's a young guard as a junior that shoots the ball pretty good over there. Garrett Fettinger as a wing at 6'7", a guy that I think can give a lot of teams problems. And again, I think this is not just a tall basketball team, but a physical basketball team. And they have the makeup. Once you get into postseason play, you're going to have kids that are going to be willing to be physical, go get rebounds. And I think this River Ridge team has a very good makeup to make a push and in this Class 6A and maybe go a little bit further than they went last season.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point there when you talk about just kind of the evolution of some of those teams. It takes a while to learn how to win. We kind of talk about that sometimes, and I think that this is a continuation of that, and River Ridge building some pieces here now. So they're going to be a fun team to watch, and not to be overshadowed, the girls team, obviously the defending state champs in 6A.
Sure.
They have not played yet. They're going to head down to Hardaway. They're actually going to play at Carrollton, it looks like, but they'll have a game against Hardaway on Saturday. And excited to see what the girls can do there. Obviously, everybody got a little familiar with their game. And River Ridge, it's funny we talk about the 2020 year for the football team, but then 2021 for the baseball team, and then last year for the girls team. It's just they're that program in general and the school is figuring out how to win now, and you're starting to see some of the benefits of that.
Yeah, they're a very talented basketball team. Coach Jason Taylor has been over there for a long while. He won a state championship last season. Congrats to him. He's going to have to replace one of the best players in school history, Matea Gale, as she's moved on and graduated. Still return a lot of talent. Again, I don't have the full scouting report on the River Ridge girls yet, but I think this is a team that is primed to be in that conversation for another Region 6-6A region title.
It will certainly be fun to watch again. They haven't played yet. They'll play on Saturday. Sequoyah played Walton. Now, Walton is one of the better teams in
top 10 state team.
Right,
7A.
7A.
Yep.
Don't worry, that region is still loaded. Obviously, Cherokee in it from what they did last year and ended up playing Wheeler in the state title. So that's all in one region. And Walton looks like they're going to be super competitive in that region again this year. A big win for Walton. It was 93-34 there. Obviously, Sequoyah would like to get off to a faster start there, but they will have the opportunity to right the ship. They're going to play North Paulding, and I believe that game is on Saturday.
Yeah, a chance to bounce back for Sequoyah. I tell you what, they ran into a buzzsaw. J.P. Wells, I want to mention this for Walton, 8 of 10 three-point shooting. Oof. That is 80%.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Three-point shooting. So they certainly ran into a buzzsaw last night, and Walton, a very well-coached team. So Coach Bracco, again, in his first season over at Sequoyah, a seasoned head coach. Let's not forget, won a state title down at Dunwoody back in, I feel like that's been 06, 07. He spent some time in a couple other places. Was at last stop was at East Forsyth, and now he's over at Sequoyah. He's got a few pieces around him. Brendan Tousineau is probably the name that most people will need to be familiar with. A 6'5 junior. He kind of plays a little guard, a little forward, can shoot the ball really well. Cade Lomas, another good shooter they've got coming in. Matlock Gimberling has done good work. Logan Parrott as well. Sam Ayenla, one of the seniors over there, really long kind of guard, kind of plays forward a little bit for them. So they've got a lot of pieces for Sequoyah. I think it's only a matter of time before Coach Bracco gets the ship righted at Sequoyah.
It will be fun to watch a little bit there. Obviously, hopefully they can put up a little bit more competitive games against, Walton's such a hard draw for game number one.
Sure.
Especially in transition year.
Absolutely.
So hopefully they'll be able to find some opponents that can give them more of an equal match, and they'll be able to find their footing moving forward. The girls' team did win, though. They beat Walton 49-40, so not the most high-scoring of games, but at the end of the day, they did come out with a big win there, and Sequoyah moves to 1-0.
Yeah, good job by Sequoyah. If I'm not mistaken, Walton did win the Region 5-7A last season on the girls' side, and so anytime you can beat a region champ and coming out, and again, Sequoyah is no slouch either.
Right,
very good basketball team. They're I'm going to sound like a broken record here. They're well coached. This is a program that has competed for a state title a couple of years back, and so I feel like at this point for Sequoyah, girls basketball year in and year out, they're going to as well, similar to River Ridge, similar to Creekview. You're going to mention these teams in the conversation for a region title.
Absolutely, yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. That's a stacked region right now.
Absolutely.
Anytime you have that many Cherokee County teams in one segment, it's going to be stacked. That brings us to our final team. That is Woodstock. The boys team got off with a win. Nice start for them. It was a 14-point win over East Paulding, 57-43. Woodstock, much like their football program, has had some issues with the basketball program trying to find their footing and finding a calm voice and a team in there that can put up some consistent wins. Definitely a step in the right direction for Woodstock, and excited to see what they can do over there. That's a program right now that is just begging for some wins, and obviously a big win to start.
Well, Coach Eric Blair coming over from Kennesaw Mountain as the head coach. It's his first year. He's got a very seasoned group of players. They've been around. One name I'm going to mention, and I believe it's right now he's just a power forward center, and I think he's a left-hander. Taj Saragba is a freshman at 6'7", and he's got all the tools to be one of the next – a legit freshman at 6'7". He's got all the tools to be one of the next great players in the county in this freshman class. So, again, still young, all right, but knows how to play the game. And they can get some of those guys at Woodstock, some of those seniors to kind of come around him and be complementary pieces, it could be a very competitive year for Woodstock, a team. I think they only won maybe 4 or 5 games last season. So I think at this point, getting off to a 1-0 start is great for their confidence. That's a team that will it'll be interesting. They'll have Cherokee coming up here in just about a couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see where both those teams line up and match up.
That'd be a fun one to watch. And again, rivalry game.
Absolutely.
As most of our county teams are. Moving on to the girls' side of the ball, Woodstock 1-1. They played East Paulding the same time and a win for them, and then a loss against North Cobb yesterday. So we'll see what the girls' team can do at Woodstock. They for a while there, they were one of the best programs, and it's not that they've fallen off. That's not the right term for it, but maybe just trying to get back to a level where they can compete in that region, as you were talking about, that is so stacked. It's such a tough break right now because with the 5 Cherokee County teams in that one region, there is one county team that's going to get left out, and I don't really 100% know who it is. I kind of have an idea of who it ain't, but as far as who it actually will be is a tough determiner.
Yeah, and again, this is a team that has a new head coach as well, Coach Leak, taking over the reins as head coach. As you mentioned, a Woodstock team has had some success. They played for a state title game a couple of years ago. Bridget Upberg is no longer at Woodstock. She's moved on. At one point, at least to me, one of the most prolific scorers, could kind of, one of the quickest releases I've seen, and just a fun player to watch in her time at Woodstock. So they've got some holes to fill there, certainly offensively. As you mentioned, Coop, you've got 5 teams in the county in that region. Somebody's going to get left out, somebody that can play some pretty good basketball.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and I know that Woodstock is tired of being that one that's kind of been kicked out across a few different sports outside of baseball, which has been obviously their bread and butter. But I think on the basketball court, you're going to see them take some leaps and bounds, as really both sides there this year, and that'll be fun to watch.
Absolutely will.
All right, well, that's the basketball roundup. There you go. Hopefully next week or the week after, we'll have a little bit more in-depth with some things that we can cover. We're trying to get all that ironed out, and we just wanted to make mention of that, as it is week 1 technically of the season, I guess.
First regular season games were last Saturday was the first day that we could have regular season games in the GHSA, and so some teams took advantage of that last Saturday, and we're in full swing. Typically, if you're not used to basketball, high school basketball in Georgia, those games are typically Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday is typically when your games are scheduled. And, right now we're going into tournament time, so you'll see some holiday tournaments, Thanksgiving-type tournaments, and holiday tournaments as we get closer to the Christmas season. So, if you have a chance, get out and support some of these young men young men and women on the hardwood, as there's some fantastic action all around Cherokee County in basketball.
And just a reminder, we are working on the broadcasting side of that. We will eventually have games of the week with the basketball teams. It's just we're kind of waiting for Thanksgiving. I think it wouldn't make a lot of sense for us to jump in before Thanksgiving. So once Thanksgiving has passed, we will work on that and keep everybody informed, and hopefully bring in a new audience, and our fans that are from football will stick around for that.
Absolutely.
And, one of the things that's always fun about high school sports is you're going to hear some names that across the board. So
yes, you will.
You will certainly be able to keep entertained with that. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in with us on that end. So, again, our game of the week, back to football, Sequoyah and Douglas County. That game Friday, 7 o'clock. Make sure you join us, Stationhead app, stationhead.com, northgasportsnetwork.com/live. And, of course, you can always find us across all of our social media platforms as well, on Twitter, Facebook, anything like that. Art?
Coop, can we give a shout-out to our sponsor from last week for the playoff game?
We sure can.
I mean, Tina Kugel Photography, man, put us on.
She did,
and we really appreciate her being our sponsor last week. Glad to have her back in the fold this week as well.
Absolutely, she'll be back and providing the exclusive coverage of this game. So make sure you join us again. Everything we do is 100% free for everyone. So you are all welcome to join us. It's 100% free. Just download the app or check us out online, and we'll be going live again at about 7 o'clock on Friday. So with all that being said, we'll see you all there. Have a good week, everybody.